Here on 910 AM, the Superstation, the Future Radio. Hey, I'm your host, Brother Michael Imhotep. It is Sunday, May 26th, 2019, Memorial Day weekend. We're live. Welcome to the African History Network show. Hope everybody's doing well tonight. I was out on Belle Isle today for the annual Blue and White Picnic 2019, Phi Beta Sigma Fraternity Incorporated. Zeta Phi Beta Sorority Incorporated. Shout out to my brothers of Phi Beta Sigma and sisters of Zeta Phi Beta. So I was going to go out there earlier today, but then it started raining, and I was working on pulling together the content for tonight's show, special edition, Memorial Day edition. So I said, let me get out here before I head to the radio station. All right, so we have a lot to talk about. Trump has lost his mind more than normal, and we're going to deal with some of that tonight. We'll talk about impeachment. It's time to impeach Trump. If you saw my broadcast I did earlier in the week on Facebook, our Facebook fan page, the African History Network, the African History Network, you know I talked about that. But on tonight's show, we'll deal with, in the first segment, we'll deal with the African-American roots of Memorial Day. The African-American roots of Memorial Day. A lot of people don't know the real history of Memorial Day, and it has its roots going back to May of 1865, towards the end of the Civil War, the month before the Civil War officially ended. Okay, so we'll talk about the African-American roots of Memorial Day. We did it first, okay, and we know Memorial Day is coming up, so when we celebrate it, we have to understand it ties right into African history and African American history. Okay, and then also we'll deal with it's time to impeach Trump. He's getting worse by the day. He's getting worse by the day, and I'll explain that. We saw this past week, we saw 38 Democrats in the House of Representatives say that they support starting the impeachment process, and we saw one Republican, Representative Justin Amash of Michigan, who tweeted reasons why Trump should be while the impeachment process should start. Impeachment does not mean removal from office, and we'll get into that and understand what impeachment means based upon the U.S. Constitution, specifically Article 2, Section 4 of the U.S. Constitution. But Trump is getting worse day by day. We saw that he gave sweeping power to his hand-picked Attorney General, William Barr, to investigate the investigators dealing with the Russian investigation. Even though Trump claimed that the Mueller report totally exonerated him, which it did not, he continues to lie. He continues to get worse day by day. So we'll deal with that and with some of the things that took place this past week. The 3-minute meeting that he had on infrastructure that he stormed out of, and then went into the Rose Garden of the White House and continued to lie about the findings of the Mueller report. Okay, so also this past week, we saw an archaeological find that ties directly into African American history. The last American slave ship, called the Clotilda, was discovered in Alabama this past week. All the major news outlets had articles about it: National Geographic, New York Times, Washington Post. So we'll talk about that. I did a broadcast about 3 weeks ago, I guess, about Radoshi. And Radoshi was the last known survivor of the Clotilda slave ship. And she passed away in 1937. Before that, Cudjoe Lewis, we thought, was the last known survivor of the Clotilda slave ship. The Clotilda was the last slave ship that came into the U.S. in 1860. It came into Alabama. This is the year before the Civil War started. But this was even though the transatlantic slave trade had been abolished by the U.S. Congress March 2nd, 1807, and that went into effect January 1st, 1808. So all those slave ships that came in bringing Africans from January 1st, 1808 on to 1860, that was all illegal. Okay, that was all illegal based upon the laws that the federal government passed, and we know that all ties into Article 1, Section 9 of the U.S. Constitution. So when I explain to people who are trying to make legal arguments for reparations. Okay, not emotional arguments that sound good on YouTube, but actual legal arguments. When I say you need to read the U.S. Constitution, you have to read the U.S. Constitution and understand law. This is one of the things I'm talking about. Okay, so we'll talk about that as well. Huge find, huge archaeological discovery this past week in Alabama. Now, last weekend we talked about Black billionaire Robert F. Smith. Robert F. Smith, who pledged to pay off the student loan debt of Morehouse College grads. Okay, so this past week, interviews were done with some of the grads of that graduating class 2019 of Morehouse College, HBCU, and it's a African American male college. All right, so I have a segment we're going to share with you, an interview with a few of those grads who talk about how they're going to pay it forward, And I think it's very interesting. I think it's very important to talk about this story and different aspects of this story, because these are intelligent African American men who are talking about education, what they want to do with their lives. And we see day after day, we see a lot of negative stories about African American men in the media. We see negative stereotypes of African American men, but we don't see enough stories of intelligent, articulate African American men talking about their dreams and aspirations, talking about what they are already doing, talking about empowering their communities. Okay, but really the story, the number of African American men doing things that are positive far outnumber the number doing things negatively. Okay, but what happens is that the media oftentimes focuses on what's negative. If you look at, I did a broadcast last Sunday actually, dealing with Robert F. Smith, and I did another one dealing with a few days before that. I did another one dealing with the Thug Day that some white students at a Houston, Texas school, high school had, and they were wearing oversized jerseys, baggy pants, gold chains, fake tattoos, and they were imitating stereotypes of African Americans promoted by the media. Okay, and they called it Thug Day. It was during the Spirit Week at this high school, and it was supposed to be Jersey Day, but they turned it about 30 high school students turned it into Thug Day. And in that video that I did talking about that topic, I talked about a lot of the studies that show how the media negatively depicts African American men and women, but specifically African American men. And we know that thinkprogress.org has an article entitled "How News Outlets Help Convince You That Most Criminals Are Black." How news outlets help convince you that most criminals are black, from thinkprogress.org. And that article deals with how it was a nationwide study, and it deals with how local news media, local news stations disproportionately run stories where the perpetrators of the violence are African Americans, okay, which is out of proportion with their actual arrest rates. Okay, so check that out on our YouTube channel, Michael Imhotep, and also our Facebook fan page, The African History Network, The African History Network. All right, so we'll talk about all these topics and more tonight. And then we know yesterday was African Liberation Day, okay? And African Liberation Day was celebrated once again at the Charles H. Wright Museum of African American History. I was there also, it took place Friday and Saturday. Brother Jamon Jordan was the keynote speaker on Friday. So tonight we'll talk some about the history of African Liberation Day, which commemorates the founding of the Organization of Afro-American Unity, May 25th, 1963. All right, and then also So we'll deal with that and more on tonight's show. Now, on the African History Network, we focus on educating, empowering, and inspiring people of African descent throughout the diaspora and around the world, because right now it corrects your own behavior. What you do for yourself, what you do to yourself, and what you allow other people to do to you and get away with is based upon what you think about yourself. What you think about yourself is based upon what you have been taught about yourself. What you've been taught about yourself is based upon everything you've read, heard, and seen about yourself. Now, when you control the radius of a man's thoughts, you can control the circumference of his actions, because the mind can't do or teach what it doesn't know. Now, we do a number of different topics here on the show. We do current events in history and politics, education, economic empowerment, entrepreneurship, relationships, love, sex, health issues, and much, much more. Visit our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. All of my DVD lectures are there. You can sign up for our email newsletter also there. Text the word Kemet, K-E-M-E-T, to 22828 to sign up for the email newsletter. You can also donate to the African History Network, paypal.me/the AHN show, paypal.me/the AHN show. All right. I know we're coming up here on a break. When we come back, we're going to jump into this topic dealing with the African American origins of Memorial Day. Okay, the African American origins of Memorial Day is a very, very interesting history, and it wasn't until 2011 that we learned about the connection between Memorial Day and African Americans going back to the end of right before the Civil War ended. Okay, follow us. We're broadcasting on our Facebook fan page, The African History Network, The African History Network on Facebook. Also on 910 AM Superstation's YouTube channel as well. And let's see who we have on Facebook. Goddess Mother, Eric Toomer. Let's see who else. Larry, Angela, Mildred, Letitia, just a few people watching us on our Facebook fan page, The African History Network. Okay, so share this broadcast on your Facebook page, and also the call-in number is 313-778-7600, 313-778-7600. Special Memorial Day edition of the African History Network show. All right, listen to 910 AM, the Superstation, the Future Radio. I'm Michael Imhotep, the African History Network show. We'll be back in a few minutes.
Or hit with high interest rates. Low credit score happens to many of us.
All right, everybody stand by. We'll be back in a couple minutes here. Stand by. Who we have here? We have here Calvin, LaShawn, Goddess, Miriam. Okay. Let me see. Let's pull this up. All right. You can register for the online courses I teach. We have them in the bundle pack. They're all on demand. It's on sale $40, regularly $130. Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Ma'afa. Understanding the transatlantic slave trade, what they didn't teach you in school. Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Ma'afa. Understanding the transatlantic slave trade, what they didn't teach you in school. That's a 14-hour, 7-session online course that I teach. Deal with thousands of years of history. And then also, post this here, you can donate to the African History Network, paypal.me/the AHN show. Paypal.me/the AHN show. All right. We'll be back in a minute from the break. Okay, who we have here? Let me share this also from 910 AM's page. Do this now.
30 seconds.
All right. So we have Jolyn Walker, a few of the people watching.
Ten seconds.
All right.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Welcome back to the African History Network show right here on 910 AM, the Superstation, the Future Radio. Hey, I'm your host, Brother Michael Imhotep. It is Sunday, May 26, 2019, Memorial Day edition of the African History Network show. So we're live today. So hope everybody's doing well. Calling number 313-778-7600, 313-778-7600. All right, so a lot of people celebrate Memorial Day, and but a lot of people don't know the African American roots of Memorial Day. Okay, so that's what we're going to talk about some tonight. Now, I've seen articles about this going back to 2011. I think one of the first articles I saw dealing with this topic was from theroot.com. Theroot.com. Memorial Day, blacks were first to celebrate, scholar says. Memorial Day, blacks were first to celebrate, scholar says. This is from May 27th, 2011. I've talked about this a number of times, talked about this here on this show and other shows on 910 AM Superstation also, okay? So when we look at the origins of Memorial Day, right, we know that Memorial Day is the last Monday in May, and is when we honor our dead soldiers who served in the military. Now, Memorial Day also marks the unofficial start of summer and is celebrated by cookouts, 3-day weekends, etc. Now, many people don't know that Memorial Day has its origins with African Americans at the end of the Civil War. Now, in 1966, the federal government declared Waterloo, New York, the official birthplace of Memorial Day, Waterloo, New York. And Waterloo, New York, which first celebrated this day on May 5th, 1866. May 5th, 1866. This is the year after the Civil War ends. Waterloo, New York was chosen because it hosted an annual community-wide event during which businesses closed and residents decorated the graves of soldiers with flowers and flags. Now, if we look at what was called Decoration Day, Decoration Day precedes the Memorial Day, what we know as Memorial Day holiday. And on May 5th, 1868, this is 3 years after the Civil War ends, May 5th, 1868, General John A. Logan, who was a leader of an organization for Northern Civil War veterans, called for a nationwide day of remembrance later in the month of May. It was May 30th, 1868, okay? And he said, quote, the 30th of May, 1868 is designated for the purpose of strewing with flowers or otherwise decorating the graves of comrades who died in defense of their country during the late rebellion and whose bodies now lie in almost every city, village, and hamlet, churchyard in the land, end quote, he proclaimed. Now, that date of Decoration Day, as he called it, okay, May 30th, 1868, was chosen because it was not the anniversary of any particular battle. Okay, it was chosen because it was not the anniversary of any particular battle. Now, on the first Decoration Day, General James Garfield made a speech at Arlington National Cemetery, and 5,000 participants decorated the graves of the 20,000 Union and Confederate soldiers buried there. Now, many northern states held similar commemorative events and reprised the tradition in subsequent years. And by 1890, each one had made Decoration Day, okay, each one of these states had made Decoration Day an official state holiday. Southern states, on the other hand, continued to honor their dead on separate days until World War I. Now, for decades, Memorial Day continued to be observed on May 30th, okay, which was the date that General Logan had selected for the first Decoration Day. But in 1968, Congress passed the Uniform Monday Holiday Act, which established Memorial Day as the last Monday in May in order to create a 3-day weekend for federal employees. Now, the change went into effect in 1971. It was President Nixon that signed that into law. It went into effect in 1971. The same law also declared Memorial Day a federal holiday. So if we look at some of the background history of the African American connection dealing with Memorial Day, we see that the historian David W. Blight, who teaches American history at Yale University, and he's also at Yale University the director of the Gilder Lerman Center for the Study of Slavery, Resistance, and Abolition. The Gilder Lerman, Lehman CRMAN, Center for the Study of Slavery, Resistance, and Abolition. And he's the author of the prize-winning book, Race and Reunion, The Civil War in American Memory. Race and Reunion, The Civil War in American Memory, and also another book entitled A Slave No More, Two Men Who Escaped to Freedom, including their narratives of emancipation. So when we look at the Civil War, just to briefly recap some of the history of the Civil War, we see that Abraham Lincoln became president-elect November 6th, 1860, okay? And he was the presidential candidate, he was the nominee for the Republican Party. Republican Party was organized by groups of abolitionists in 1854, okay? They were the counter to the Democratic Party. Now, you had the first state to secede from the Union was South Carolina, December 20th, 1860, because they feared Lincoln was going to free the enslaved Africans. All right, so, and they're going to be followed by other states as well. So rather than accepting Lincoln's leadership, you're going to have 7 southern states led by South Carolina, and then comprising of Alabama, Georgia, Florida, Louisiana, Mississippi, and Texas. They all elected to secede from the Union and form what's known as the Confederate States of America, CSA, Confederate States of America, or the Confederacy. And this was formed in February of 1861. This was the month before Lincoln's inaugural address, which took place March 4th, 1861. Now, the Confederacy elected Mexican War hero and former Secretary of War Jefferson Davis as their president. Jefferson Davis is one of the biggest traitors in the history of this country. And the CSA, Confederate States of America, began organizing an independent government modeled on the U.S. Constitution with caveats guaranteeing slavery. Because when you read their statements of secession, these Confederate states talked about how slavery was central to their way of life and their wealth, and they took up arms, they committed treason against the country, okay, and took up arms to fight against the Union to maintain slavery and maintain wealth, maintain their way of life. And then you have another idiot, okay, in the White House who just a couple weeks, who just this past week was talking about treason and proves he has no understanding of what treason is based upon Article 3, Section 3 of the U.S. Constitution. But then he praised another traitor to this country named General Robert E. Lee, who committed treason and took up arms and fought for Virginia against the Union to maintain slavery. And General Robert E. Lee was not just a traitor to this country, but a brutal slave owner. And he's being praised by a man who claims to be president, who I say is a fake president, to tell you the truth. So, and then he wants to throw around treason. We'll get into that in the second hour. He wants to throw around the term treason, but doesn't understand what treason is. I just find that very interesting. And I've told you back in 2016, Donald Trump is the Manchurian candidate. I told you this. So, on April 12th of 1861, the Confederacy began fighting to assert its independence when Confederate troops fired on Fort Sumter in the Charleston, South Carolina harbor. Okay, so this is when the Civil War started, April 12th, 1861. This is the month after Lincoln was inaugurated. All right, so Lincoln, in Lincoln's inaugural address on March 4th of 1861, Lincoln proclaimed that it was his duty to maintain the Union. Okay, because you already had 7 states. The prior month, February of 1861, you had these 7 states that formed the Confederate States of America. They seceded from the Union. Okay, they broke away from the Union. South Carolina, Alabama, Georgia, Florida, Louisiana, Mississippi, and Texas. So Lincoln is trying to keep the Union together, keep more states from seceding, breaking away from the Union. Okay, so Lincoln proclaimed that it was his duty to maintain the Union. He also declared that he had no intention of ending slavery where it existed, or of repealing the fugitive slave law. And this was a position that horrified African Americans and their white allies. African American abolitionists, white abolitionists, including Frederick Douglass, were horrified by Lincoln's proclamation, proclaiming that it was his duty to maintain the Union and that he declared that he had no intention of ending slavery where it already existed. Now, Lincoln's statement, however, did not satisfy the Confederacy. Okay, and they're going to attack Fort Sumter, starts the Civil War, and after that, soon after that, you're going to have more states secede from the Union. Arkansas, North Carolina, Tennessee, and Virginia are going to join the Confederacy as well. So you have about 2.4 million people who fight in the Civil War for both the North and the South, including Harriet Tubman, who fought on behalf of the North. Okay, and later in the show we'll talk about Harriet Tubman being on the $20 bill and how that's being delayed. Secretary of Treasury Steve Mnuchin talked about this past Wednesday, May 22nd. He was testifying in front of the House Finance Committee. He was being grilled by Representative Ayanna Pressley about this. And his explanation why Harriet Tubman would be delayed in being on the $20 bill doesn't make any sense. Bottom line is this dealing with white supremacy and racism, and Donald Trump doesn't want her on the $20 bill, replacing his favorite president, Andrew Jackson, who was a white supremacist slave owner. Imagine that. So, on April 26, okay, General Joseph, April 26, 1865, General Joseph E. Johnston handed over the last Confederate army to General Sherman near Durham, North Carolina. Now, historian David Blight talked about how he was in a Harvard University library doing research for his book Reunion and Race, okay, back in, this was going back about 27 years ago. And he stumbled upon a book containing the paperwork of a Union veterans organization and a folder labeled First Decoration Day. Now, the information found there led him to South Carolina's former Washington Race Course and Jockey Club. The former Washington Race Course and Jockey Club. Now, this was a prestigious horse racing track that was turned into a prison for Union soldiers, okay? And many of these Union soldiers are going to die there, but they were not properly buried, all right? Now, keep in mind, if you saw the presentation I did at Nandy's Knowledge Cafe back in February dealing with how African-American jockeys used to dominate horse racing, we'll have that on DVD and digital download probably this week, because I got to find the video for that, video footage I shot for that. African-American jockeys used to dominate horse racing, okay? The first winner of the Kentucky Derby was a 19-year-old African-American man named Oliver Lewis. And his trainer, Ansel Williamson, was a former slave. Okay, and about 13 of the 15 jockeys in the first Kentucky Derby were African-American. And African-Americans started in horse racing during slavery. Okay, so the information found there in Harvard University's library led historian David Blight to the South Carolina's former Washington Race Course and Jockey Club. All right. Now, on May 1st, 1865, this is the month before the Civil War ends. The Civil War officially ends June 2nd, 1865. We know it's going to be June 19th, 1865 in Galveston, Texas, that General Order Number 3 is issued by General Gordon Granger. And that's why we celebrate Juneteenth, okay? That freed those enslaved Africans there in Galveston, Texas, about 250,000 of them. And speaking of Juneteenth, I will be back in Atlanta June 14th through the 16th at the huge Juneteenth celebration that Bob Johnson organizes there at Moselle Park. So I'll be speaking, I guess on Saturday. I'll be a vendor there as well all 3 days. So you'll hear more about that, and we'll get that on our website also. I'll be back in Atlanta in June of 2019. All right, so May 1st, 1865, freed Africans gathered in Charleston, South Carolina to commemorate the death of Union soldiers and the end of the Civil War. Now, 3 years after that, General John Logan issued a special order that May 30th, 1868 be observed as Decoration Day, the first Memorial Day, a day set aside, quote, for the purpose of strewing with flowers or otherwise decorating the graves of comrades who died in defense of their country during the late rebellion and whose bodies now lie in almost every city, village, and hamlet, churchyard in the land. Okay, now, so you're going to have thousands of black Charlestonians, Okay, African Americans there living in South Carolina. Black Charlestonians, most of them former slaves, they're gonna remain in the city of Charleston, South Carolina, and they conducted a series of commemorations to declare their sense of the meaning of the Civil War. Now, the largest of these events, and unknown until some extraordinary luck that historian David Blight said that he had, the largest of these events took place on May 1st, 1865. Now, during the final year of the Civil War, the Confederates had converted the planters' horse track, okay, the plantation owners, the planters' horse track, the Washington Race Course and Jockey Club, they converted that into an outdoor prison. Union soldiers were kept in horrible conditions in the interior of this racetrack. At least 257 Union soldiers died of exposure and disease and were hastily buried in a mass grave beyond the grandstand. Now, some 28 African American workmen went to the site, reburied the Union soldiers who were dead, reburied them properly, and built a high fence around the cemetery. They whitewashed the fence and built an archway over an entrance on which they inscribed the words "Martyrs of the Racecourse." Martyrs of the Racecourse. Then African American Charlestonians, in cooperation with white missionaries and teachers, staged an unforgettable parade of 10,000 people on the slaveholders' racecourse. The symbolic power of the low country planter aristocracy's horse track. Okay, the symbolic power of the low country planter aristocracy's horse track. Okay, and this is where, and so you have to understand, the horse track was where the white aristocrats, the white slave owners, plantation owners, displayed their wealth, leisure, and influence. Okay, so the symbolic power of the low country planter aristocracy's horse track was not lost on the free African Americans, the former slaves. A New York Tribune correspondent witnessed this event and described it as, quote, "a procession of friends and mourners South Carolina and the United States never saw before." A procession of friends and mourners as South Carolina and the United States never saw before. Now, okay, so this deals with some of the history of the first Memorial Day, okay, which goes back to May 1st, 1865. All right, now, at 9 o'clock in the morning on May 1st, 1865, the procession to this special cemetery began as 3,000 black school children, newly enrolled in the freedmen's schools, marched around the race course, each with an armload of roses and singing John Brown's Body. John Brown, who led the Harper's Ferry raid in 1859. The children were followed by 300 African American women representing the Patriotic Association, which was a group organized to distribute clothing and goods among the freedmen, okay, the formerly enslaved African Americans. Now, the women carried baskets of flowers, wreaths, and crosses to the burial ground. The Mutual Aid Society, and the Mutual Aid Society, that was one of the many types of co-ops that we had. The Mutual Aid Societies, benevolent associations, they provided all types of resources and aid to enslaved Africans and formerly enslaved Africans. So if you read the book Collective Courage by Dr. Jessica Gordon Nimhard, she deals with a whole history that African Americans have with various types of cooperatives. Another one was the Free African Society as well, founded I think it was about 1787, the Free African Society. So the Mutual Aid Society, which was a benevolent association of African American men, next marched in cadence around the track and into the cemetery, followed by large crowds of white and African American citizens. All dropped their spring blossoms on the graves in a scene recorded by a newspaper correspondent who said, quote, "When all had left the holy mounds, the tops, the sides, and the spaces between them were one mass of flowers, not a speck of earth could be seen. And as the breeze wafted, the sweet perfumes from them outside and beyond. There were few eyes among those who knew the meaning of the ceremony that were not dim with tears of joy, end quote. Now, while the adults marched around the graves, the children were gathered in a nearby grove where they sang America. They also sang We'll Rally Around the Flag, and they sang the Star Spangled Banner. Okay, I guess they didn't know the history of the Star Spangled Banner, and Francis Scott Key, who wrote it, or the third stanza, but okay, I understand it's right after slavery, so okay. Now, the official dedication ceremony was conducted by the ministers of the all-black churches in Charleston, South Carolina. Now, with prayer, the reading of biblical passages, and the singing of spirituals, African American Charlestonians gave birth to an American tradition. In so doing, they declared the meaning of the war in the most public way possible by their labor, their words, their songs, and their solemn parade of roses, lilacs, and marching feet on the old planters' race course. All right. So for them to do this on this race course is a declaration of their freedom in denouncing their former slave masters, because the race courses was a symbol of that white Southern aristocracy, the white plantation owners, that elite class. The race course was a symbol of that. That's where the poor, in general, that's not where poor white people hung out, the race courses. Okay, that's where the wealthy congregated. Now, after the dedication, the crowds gathered at the race course grandstand to hear some 30 speeches by Union soldiers, local African American ministers, and abolitionist missionaries. Cookouts or picnics ensued around the grounds, and in the afternoon, a full brigade of Union infantry, including colored troops, marched in double column around the martyrs' graves and held a drill on the infield of the racecourse. The war was over, and Memorial Day had been founded by African Americans in a ritual of remembrance and consecration. Although contemporaneous accounts from the Charleston Daily Courier, a local newspaper at the time, describe and document the 1865 ceremony that took place there, and the event was one of the earliest known observances, similar to what we would now recognize as Memorial Day. Whether it was truly the first such ceremony and what influence, if any, it might have had on later observances are still matters of contention. Professor David Blight termed it the first Memorial Day because it predated most of the other contenders, but he noted he has no evidence that it led to General Logan's call for a national holiday in 1868, which was celebrated May 30th, 1868. He said, quote, "I'm much more interested in the meaning that's being conveyed in that incredible ritual more than who's first." Okay, so and then we know that when we look at in 1968, we see that Congress passed the Uniform Monday Holiday Act, which established Memorial Day as the last Monday in May. This is why we celebrated the last Monday in May, in order to create a 3-day weekend for federal holidays. The change went into effect in 1971, and the same law also declared Memorial Day as a federal holiday. All right. Now, so Memorial Day as Decoration Day, as it was originally called Decoration Day, gradually came to be, the Memorial Day as Decoration Day gradually came to be known. Originally honored only those who died fighting during the Civil War. That's who it was for. Originally just for those who died during the Civil War. But during World War I was 1914 to 1918, the United States found itself embroiled in another conflict, and the holiday evolved to commemorate American military personnel who died in all wars. All right. So when we look at some of the Memorial Day holidays, we see cities and towns across the United States host Memorial Day parades each year. often incorporating military personnel and members of veterans organizations. Now, some of the largest parades take place in Chicago, New York, and Washington, D.C. Americans also observe Memorial Day by visiting cemeteries and memorials. On a less somber note, many people throw parties and barbecues on the holiday, perhaps because it unofficially marks the beginning of summer. All right, and speaking of Memorial Day, I will be at the 50th anniversary. Let's see, the 50th annual parade that the city of Inkster holds for Memorial Day. I'll be there tomorrow. I'll be there May 27th. Okay, so those in the Inkster area come out to that. I think it starts at Inkster City Hall. Okay, they probably have that on their website, cityofinkster.org. I think it's their website. And let me pull that up here. Cityinkster.org or cityinkster.gov. Try to pull up their website. Cityinkster.com is their website. Cityofinkster.com. Okay, they have the information right on the homepage of their website. Okay, so I'll be there for that. Okay, so that deals with some of the African American origins of Memorial Day. For more information dealing with that history, check out history.com. History.com. They have a good article entitled Memorial Day. Also, theroot.com has their article Memorial Day, Blacks Were First to Celebrate, Scholar Says, from May 27th, 2011. And also Snopes.com. Snopes.com has a good article dealing with the origins of Memorial Day and separating fact from fiction, called The Origins of Memorial Day. Okay, but we understand now that it has African American roots also. And you know, at the African History Network on Memorial Day, oftentimes I post articles dealing with African Americans who fought for the freedom and liberation of African people around the world, who died. Okay, so we'll post some articles about that as well. 313-778-7600 is the call-in number if you have a question or comment. 313-778-7600 is the call-in number if you have a question or comment. Okay. So this past week,
Thank you for calling 910. Can I have a name, please?
we saw that Donald Trump continued to go off
All
the
right,
hinges.
put you on hold, all right,
He
Robert?
continued to lose his mind. And I know we're coming up on a break, but
Okay, no problem.
we're going to we'll get into that on the other side of the break. We saw that Wednesday, May 22nd, Democrats had held their weekly 9 a.m. meeting, and in that meeting they talked about the growing calls for the beginning of the impeachment process of Donald Trump. And then after that, Nancy Pelosi held a brief press conference, and she talked about how it appears Donald Trump is involved in a cover-up. That set Trump off, who has a short fuse. They were supposed to meet, the Democrats were supposed to meet with Trump to discuss how to pay for the $2 trillion infrastructure plan that they came to agreement on about 3 weeks prior. He's in the meeting for 3 minutes. He storms out. Okay, and he goes into the Rose Garden and tells a bunch of lies. I did a broadcast that day dealing with that. Go check that out on our YouTube channel, Michael Imhotep, Imhotep. It's also on our Facebook fan page, the African History Network. I want to go to this first clip here before the break. This is from NBCNews.com. Pelosi talks impeachment and Trump intervention at press conference. This is from May 23rd, 2019, the day after. Let's go to this clip.
Behavior in terms of his obstruction of justice, the things that he is doing. It's very clear. It's in plain sight. It cannot be denied. Ignoring subpoenas, obstruction of justice. Yes, these could be impeachable offenses, but I intend not to, where the fact, there are three things. You might
1 minute.
understand it better if you remember these three things. We want to follow the facts to get the truth to the American people, with a recognition, too, that no one is above the law, and three, that the president is engaged in a cover-up. And that is what my statement is. How we deal with it is a decision that our caucus makes, and our caucus is very much saying whatever we do, we need to be ready when we do it. And I do think that impeachment is a very divisive place to go in our country. And what we can get the facts to the American people through our investigation, it may take us to a place that is unavoidable in terms of impeachment or not. But we're not at that place. Again, I pray for the President of the United States. I wish that his family or his administration or his staff would have an intervention for the good of the country. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Okay, so that was all right. That's from May 23rd. That's from NBCNews.com. Check out they have a really good article. Pelosi tells colleagues Trump is villainous and that he wants to be impeached. That's from NBCNews.com for May 23rd, 2019. Let's go to the phone lines quickly. We're going to continue this topic on the other side of the break, dealing with it's time to impeach Trump. It's time to impeach Trump. Here's why, and we'll deal with what impeachment is. Let's go quickly to the phone lines. Let's go to Robert, line 1. Robert, welcome to the African History Network show. Tell us where you're calling from.
Hello, Warren, Michigan. How are you?
All right, where are you calling from?
Warren, Michigan.
Warren, okay, go ahead, Robert.
I'm an Italian-American guy. Hey!
Italian-American.
I love you. I appreciate everything you say and everything
Thank you.
do. I love you. Hey, question is, where's the show going tonight? That's my question.
You said, where is the show going tonight?
Where are we going tonight? I listen all the time. I go to sleep with you guys. I listen. Please tell me, where are we going tonight?
We're dealing with a few different topics. We just did a segment dealing with the African-American origins of Memorial Day. And then in our next segment, we're going to deal with some things that happened this past week with Trump and deal with what impeachment is. Then we're going to Then we're going to talk about Harriet Tubman on the $20 bill and why it's being delayed to 2028.
Mm-hmm. And
Go ahead.
I'm Italian American, and I don't believe in Christopher Columbus because I knew Amerigo Vespucci is the guy that actually went. Columbus went to where did he go?
He went into Central America. He went into the Caribbean, and he went to South America.
The East Indies or Bahamas or whatever. He didn't discover America. Number one. My point is this: I enjoy your show.
Thank you.
I'm a white man. I get tan really good. Hey, I love you people. I love everybody. I love the show.
Right.
But I want to say something. I want to make a statement.
Okay.
My parents belonged to Fuller's Hope back in the 60s.
Okay.
I was born in 1960 myself. I was born in this country, an Italian-American family. And we were the first people. I want everybody to hear this out there in Detroit and around this city and country. The first white people, the black people that moved in our Warren were the Baileys. Okay? And I know them personally.
Okay.
This is now a little bit about race, but I will say this. Pam Bailey, their father, Corrado Bailey, was black, the mom was white, and I was supposed to marry her. She went to my high school.
Okay.
The point I'm making is I was supposed to marry her. I'm an Italian kid, you know, boom, boom, boom.
Right.
And now we're switching over to, we're talking about race, Warren, Michigan.
Okay. Now I got a minute before the break, so I got a minute before the break, so go ahead.
Warren has a 10% black population. Now, one time it had nothing. They had one black cop. My point is this.
Right.
My point is, if we're talking about relations in people and how we get along, I was brought in, and my parents belonged to Fuller's Hope. We were brought into this world to believe that everybody is equal. But you know, like I know, it's not always that way.
Right.
And I agree with you in the things you say. There is a division. So, okay. I just want to say, you know, a white man has it better than sometimes a black man.
Okay.
I work in Detroit in apartments. I own 10 apartments. And I have McNichols in 7 Mile. I have McNichols in Shaner. I mean, not McNichols in 7 Mile. I'm sorry, McNichols in Greenfield. We maintain all these apartments. And I deal with all types of people all the time.
Okay.
My point is, so if I listen to your show,
right,
it seems like it's always about race. You know, but I deal with, I'm a white guy, but I got a good tan. But I deal with people of all color all my life. So I don't see where this comes in to figure in. I don't see it.
Okay.
I don't see the color line. I don't see it.
Okay. Well, keep listening. We're coming up on a break, Robert. Robert, keep listening. We're coming up on a break. I appreciate you calling in. Keep listening. You're going to get it because we're going to continue this tonight. You listen to the African History Network show right here on 910 a.m. Superstation, the Future Radio. I'm Michael Imhotep, the African History Network show. And when we come back, we'll deal with it's time to impeach Trump. Here's why. We'll be back in a few minutes.
We all love fried food, but the problem is
He sounded like he was drunk.
Yeah, when I picked up the phone, I was like, thank you for calling 910. Can I have your name, please?
All right, stand by, guys.
Hello?
Stand by.
Hello?
How's everybody doing? Share this broadcast on your Facebook page. Invite your friends to tune in also. We got people listening all across the country. All right. You can donate to the African History Network, paypal.me/the AHN show, paypal.me/the AHN show. Or visit our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. I see we have Toya, we have Eric. Okay, that clip from Nancy Pelosi, I'm going to play that again because it's only like a minute and 30 seconds.
Mm-hmm.
So when I come back, I'm going to reintroduce that, play that again because we're going into this next segment, dealing with impeachment. Let's see, Bruce. Birds of a feather flock together. We got Abdul, Brother Kwesi in Detroit. Eric Toomer. Bruce. Okay. People like my shirt. Let's see here. Okay, Fani. Toya. Kimberly. Greg. All right. Also, if you want to advertise with the African History Network, email us at customerservice@AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. Customerservice@AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. We'll let you know how you can advertise with the African History Network also. Customerservice@AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. All right, so we're going to come back. We're going to deal with this segment dealing with Trump. We'll deal with what is impeachment. Growing calls are coming from Democrats.
1 minute.
Okay, to start the impeachment process of Trump. It should have already happened. Let's see here. All right.
30 seconds.
Okay. Let's put this up.
Ten seconds.
Okay.
5.
Stand by.
3, 2, 1.
Welcome back to the African History Network show right here on 910 AM, the Superstation of Future Radio. Yeah, I'm your host, Brother Michael Imhotep. It is Sunday, May 26, 2019, Memorial Day weekend, and we just talked about the African American origins of Memorial Day. Be sure to follow us on our Facebook fan page, The African History Network, The African History Network, and our YouTube channel, Michael Imhotep, IMHOTEP, as well. Coming up at the Charles H. Wright Museum of African American History, June 8th, Saturday, June 8th, 2 p.m. to 3 p.m. My friend Jamon Jordan, historian Jamon Jordan, who's the president of the local chapter of the Association for the Study of African American Life and History. And he's also the founder of the Black Scroll Network History and Tours. He is doing a presentation at the Charles H. Wright Museum of African American History entitled Detroit Names of Enslavers of Africans. Detroit Names of Enslavers of Africans. So this deals with the white slave owners who owned African Americans who have streets in Detroit named after them. Okay, Macomb, Hamtramck, DeQuinder, Livernois, Bobian, Brush, Grossbeck, McDougal. Cass should be on here also because Cass owned at least one African. Brush, Rivard, Meldrum, Abbott. The streets and monuments of Detroit slave owners and the history behind these enemies of freedom. Okay, this is taking place Saturday, June 8th, 2019. You can check this out at theright.org, WRIGHT, theright.org, for more information. Okay, so right before the break, we were talking a little bit about what happened this past week and the growing calls of impeachment of Donald Trump. So on Wednesday, May 22nd, Donald Trump was scheduled to meet with Nancy Pelosi, Speaker of the House, and Senator Chuck Schumer, Minority Leader in the U.S. Senate, and other key Democrats to discuss the $2 trillion infrastructure deal and how to pay for it. So prior to that, early that morning at 9 a.m., Nancy Pelosi had the weekly scheduled meeting with Democrats. And one of the things that they were scheduled to talk about was the growing calls for impeachment in the among Democrats in the House of Representatives. Is now at 38 members of the House of Representatives who are Democrats who are calling for the impeachment process to start. So coming out of that, they had a press conference, and in that press conference, Nancy Pelosi talked about how it appears that Trump is involved in the cover-up. Okay, and then that set Trump off. He was only in their scheduled meeting for 3 minutes, and then he goes into the Rose Garden and has a meltdown. Okay, and tells all these lies about the Mueller report, and this was all orchestrated. This was all planned. The following day, Thursday, Nancy Pelosi did another press conference. NBC News has an article about it. Pelosi tells colleagues Trump is villainous and that he wants to be impeached. I want to go back to this clip again to introduce this segment. Let's go back to this clip that I just played.
Behavior in terms of his obstruction of justice, the things that he is doing, it's very clear. It's in plain sight. It cannot be denied. Ignoring subpoenas, obstruction of justice. Yes, these could be impeachable offenses, but I intend not to, there are three things. You might understand it better if you remember these three things. We want to follow the facts to get the truth to the American people, with a recognition, too, that no one is above the law, and three, that the president is engaged in a cover-up. And that is what my statement is. How we deal with it is a decision that our caucus makes, and our caucus is very much saying whatever we do, we need to be ready when we do it. And I do think that impeachment is a very divisive place to go in our country. And what we can get the facts to the American people through our investigation, it may take us to a place that is unavoidable in terms of impeachment or not. But we're not at that place. Again, I pray for the President of the United States. I wish that his family or his administration or his staff would have an intervention for the good of the country. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, an intervention for the good of the country. Okay, but somebody needs to intervene in his corrupt family also. Somebody needs to intervene with them. Maybe somebody on the staff could talk some sense into him. I doubt it. Okay, but this is what happened. This is what happened this past week. Now that is from Thursday. That's from the press conference Thursday. Okay. I want to go to this next clip here. This is from NBC News also. Trump storms out of meeting with Pelosi and Schumer demands. Trump storms out of meeting with Pelosi and Schumer and demands end of probes. Okay, let's go to this clip.
The standoff is turning into a stalemate after President Trump threatened not to work with Democrats until they stop investigating him, abruptly ending a meeting with Democratic leaders.
I told Senator Schumer, Speaker Pelosi, I want to do infrastructure, but you know what? You can't do it under these circumstances. So get these phony investigations over with.
The president fuming after these explosive comments from Nancy Pelosi, accusing him of hiding information from Congress.
We believe that the President of the United States is engaged in a cover-up.
I walk in to look at people that had just said that I was doing a cover-up. I don't do cover-ups.
Two Democratic sources with knowledge of the White House sit down tell NBC News that contentious cabinet room meeting lasted just 3 minutes. After walking in, not shaking a single hand, not even sitting down, President Trump lashed out at the Democratic leaders before marching out. Democrats say they were stunned, and Pelosi, in a letter to House Democrats, called it a temper tantrum.
To watch what happened in the White House would make your jaw drop.
I pray for the President of the United States.
Underscoring the bitterness after the president left, White House Counselor Kellyanne Conway asked Pelosi if she had a response to the president. According to multiple people in the room, According to a senior Trump administration official, Pelosi said that she would only respond to the president and wouldn't discuss it with Conway.
30
Conway replied sarcastically, "That's very pro-woman of you." Democrats promise their investigations will go on.
In plain sight, in the public domain, this president is obstructing justice and he's engaged in a cover-up. And that could be an impeachable.
10 seconds.
Republicans now challenging Democrats to make a decision.
They have the right to impeach a president, but they need to urinate or get off the pot.
Okay, so that was Senator John Kennedy of Louisiana, Republican. He's an idiot also. I'm telling you. I mean, see, this is an example of how elections have consequences. These are the people, just because they may not be your senator, they pass laws that impact you. This is what I've been trying to explain to people. Elections have consequences. Just because they're not from your state doesn't mean they're not passing laws that don't impact you. Okay? So watch the broadcast I did, because I did a few of them this week. Go to my YouTube channel, Michael Imhotep, Imhotep, and then or our Facebook fan page, The African History Network, and click on videos. And I dealt with why Trump needs to be impeached. And I also did one on Wednesday, May 22nd, right after the press conference that Nancy Pelosi had, and the 3-minute meeting with Trump, and then after Trump's press conference in the Rose Garden. I did one then to break down what just happened. So let's kind of look at what just happened this week, right? All right. So the past week, more Democrats have started calling for at least an impeachment inquiry to begin, as Trump continues to commit possible impeachable offenses. The count is at 38 Democrats in the House of Representatives and 1 Republican, Justin Amash of Michigan. And Justin Amash is making a better argument for impeachment than most Democrats are. Now, this past week we saw Donald Trump committed at least 5 impeachable offenses, okay, by one count. And this is after the Mueller report outlined 10 possible instances of obstruction of justice. This is after over 900 former federal prosecutors signed a petition stating that if Trump had been any other American citizen, he would have been charged with multiple felony accounts. If Trump had been any other American citizen, he would have been charged with multiple felony accounts. And this was the petition at medium.com. There have been a number of stories written about it. Former federal prosecutors who signed this petition, okay? And the count is at a little more than 900 last time I checked, okay? And let's see here. If we pull up the petition, we'll pull that up because I thought I had it already up. Okay, statement by former federal prosecutors. This is at medium.com, and we'll post this on the link of on the thread of the broadcast also. And they talk about how each of us believes that the conduct of President Trump described in Special Counsel Robert Mueller's report would, in the case of any other person not covered by the Office of Legal Counsel policy against indicting a sitting president, result in multiple felony charges for obstruction of justice. Now, these are former federal prosecutors, both Democrat and Republican, saying this. The Mueller report describes several acts that satisfy all of the elements for an obstruction charge. Conduct that obstructed or attempted to obstruct the truth-finding process, as to which the evidence of corrupt intent and connection to pending proceedings is overwhelming. These include 1, the president's efforts to fire Special Counsel Robert Mueller and to falsify evidence about the effort. 2, the president's efforts to limit the scope of Special Counsel Robert Mueller's investigation to exclude his conduct. And 3, the president's efforts to prevent witnesses from cooperating with investigators probing him and his campaign. Okay? 4, attempts to fire Mueller and then create false evidence. Attempts to fire Mueller and create false evidence. All right? So they break it down. Attempts to fire Mueller and create false evidence. Attempts to limit the Mueller investigation. and witness tampering and intimidation. They go and lay this all out. These are over 900 former federal prosecutors who have signed this petition. Okay, if Donald Trump was any other U.S. citizen, he would be charged with multiple felony charges of obstruction of justice. Okay, this is at medium.com statement by former federal prosecutors. This is from May 6, 2019. Okay, so let me post this link here for you also. All right. Okay, so this is after over 900 former federal prosecutors signed a petition stating that if Trump had been any other American citizen, he would have been charged with multiple felony accounts. Now, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, coming out of a meeting with Democrats right before meeting with Trump about how to pay for the $2 trillion infrastructure plan on Wednesday, May 22nd, 2019, said that she believed Donald Trump was involved in a cover-up. Okay. Now, when we look at all of the evidence so far, we see that it is time for House Democrats to start the impeachment process. How much more do they need to see to take action based upon Article 2, Section 4 of the U.S. Constitution? Because he was not charged with obstruction of justice or charged with obstruction of any crimes during the Mueller investigation, since Robert Mueller was following the Office of Legal Counsel memo that a sitting president cannot be indicted, Mueller was leaving this up to Congress to exercise their powers based upon Article 2 of the Constitution to hold the president accountable. And Trump is feeling more emboldened because there have not been consequences directly for him. Now, you've had 34 people who were indicted during the Mueller investigation, plus 3 companies. You had 7 people who pleaded guilty or were found guilty. Okay, and did prison time. We know Michael Cohen is in prison, Trump's former attorney of 10 years. We know Trump's former campaign chair, Paul Manafort, is in prison also. Okay, so when Trump says they found nothing, that's a lie. When Trump sits up here and says they found nothing, that's a lie. Trump doesn't mention his former campaign chair who's in prison right now. Trump doesn't want to talk about his former attorney, okay, who was paying off Stormy Daniels, and Trump is in the White House running a criminal enterprise, signing checks to repay his attorney for paying off Stormy Daniels, which is a campaign finance law violation. So when Trump says they found nothing, that's a lie. He's just hoping you're dumb enough to believe that. If we go and look at March 23rd, 2019 edition of AM Joanne Reed, MSNBC, that clip was entitled Mueller Report could be released to public eventually. Mueller report could be released to public eventually. This is right before the Mueller report was released. And they, I showed this graphic in my broadcast this past week dealing with it's time for Trump to be impeached. And also dealing with, I think I talked about it on May 22nd also, dealing with Trump storming out of the meeting, right? So if we look at this graphic for people who are watching on Facebook Live and YouTube and 9, 10 a.m. the Superstation, right? This, when you go to, we'll post this on our Facebook fan page, the African History Network. This deals with the Special Counsel investigation. Look at all these people, look at all these men who were indicted. Notice no black people are here. I'm not going to say they're all white men, but just notice ain't no black people here, okay? All right, so who we have here? We got Paul Manafort, convicted and pled guilty. Michael Cohen, pled guilty. Michael Flynn, pled guilty. Trump's former national security advisor. George Papadopoulos, who was an advisor to Trump, pled guilty. Rick Gates, who was a partner to Paul Manafort, pled guilty. Alexander Van der Swaan, pled guilty. Richard Pinedo, pled guilty. Konstantin Kilimnik, who was the Russian oligarch that Paul Manafort gave 75 pages of polling data to, dealing with the 2016 election. And Paul Manafort is discussing with Konstantin Kilimnik about key battleground states, Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, things like this. Why is he giving polling data to Russians? Paul Manafort, who's in prison right now, but Trump says they didn't find anything. Roger Stone, former advisor, either formal or informal, to Donald Trump, indicted, hasn't gone to trial yet. He was also a advisor to Richard Nixon as well, on Richard Nixon's 1968 campaign. We know that there were 12 Russian nationals, 12 Russian nationals indicted, and 12 Russian military officers indicted as well. During the Mueller investigation, that Trump says that nothing was found. They didn't find anything. 34 people charged, plus 3 companies, 7 guilty pleas, 1 conviction by trial, Paul Manafort, 4 jailed or incarcerated, 5 sentenced. And you've got 29, according to the count from the New York Times, 29 open investigations that we know of right now into the Trump campaign, Trump inauguration, Trump administration. So when we look at this, the question we have to ask is how much more do you have to see before you start the impeachment process? Because I guarantee you, if the names were changed and the president was Barack Obama and all these allegations were being made of Barack Obama, and you found out that he had unprotected sex with a porno star and that he paid off to keep quiet, I guarantee you the impeachment process would already started. The trial would have already happened in the U.S. Senate, and he'd be removed from office. I guarantee you that. There's no way if Republicans had 33 hearings regarding Benghazi of Hillary Clinton, if this stuff, if 1/10 of this was alleged to have been committed by Barack Obama, and Republicans were in charge of the House of Representatives, there wouldn't be no, we don't know, we're not sure, we have to keep saying. No. The impeachment process would have already started, and they would have already had the trial in the U.S. Senate. So when we look at all of the evidence so far, we see that it is time for House Democrats to start the impeachment process. How much more do they need to see to take? How much more do they need to see to take action based upon Article 2, Section 4 of the U.S. Constitution? Because Trump was not charged, he is becoming more emboldened, and he's getting worse day by day. He's testing the limits of his powers of what he can get away with. It's time to start the impeachment process now with impeachment inquiries. Call your member of Congress today. The number to the congressional switchboard is area code 202-224-3121. 202-224-3121. That's the congressional switchboard. You can reach any member of the U.S. House of Representatives or the U.S. Senate through the congressional switchboard. Okay? And tell them to start the impeachment process now. If Congress does not act based upon their Article 2 powers of the U.S. Constitution, then another president is going to come along 5 years from now, 10 years from now, and commit even worse offenses. And they'll say, well, wait a second, Democrats didn't impeach Trump when he was doing what he did, so why are you trying to impeach me? 202-224-3121 is the congressional switchboard. Now, last time I called the congressional switchboard, now keep in mind, usually when I call, I get the automated menu. But the last time I called, it was a live person who answered. It kind of threw me off, okay? So if it's the electronic menu, then it'll ask for your zip code, and they'll get you your member of the House of Representatives or member of the U.S. Senate, okay, congressional switchboard. Or you may get a live person, okay? So when you call, be respectful, don't curse, okay? Things like this, all right? We'll continue this on the other side of the break. We'll get deeper into this. We'll deal with what is impeachment as well. We'll deal with the impeachment process. We'll deal with some of the offenses of Trump this week also. And we saw that he gave, this past Thursday, I think it was, he gave wide-ranging powers to his hand-picked attorney general to declassify the information regarding the origins of the 2016 Russian investigation. Trump gives Attorney General sweeping power in review of 2016 campaign inquiry. The New York Times reported on May 23, 2019. Donald Trump took extraordinary steps on Thursday to give Attorney General William Barr sweeping new authorities to conduct a review into the 2016 Trump campaign's ties to Russia. The 2016 Trump campaign's ties to Russia were invested in how they were investigated, significantly escalating the administration's efforts to place those who investigated the campaign under scrutiny. And Trump is talking about jailing the investigators, former FBI Director James Comey and others. He is losing his mind. He's getting worse and worse by the day. 9:10 a.m. the Superstation of Future Radio on Michael Imhotep, the African History Network show. We'll be back in a few minutes.
Hi, I'm Joan London with A Place for Mom. Over the years, we've held
All right, stand by, everybody. We'll be back in a few minutes here. Got Goddess. All right, everybody, we'll be back in a couple minutes. Okay, so let's see. We played clip 2. Okay, so I'm going to go to clip 3. Deadline White House, fact-checking the presidential tantrum. Okay, we'll go to that. And then I'm going to go to clip 4, Trump impeachment inquiry and House should start ASAP.
Okay.
All right, how's everybody doing? We have Anita. I thought I said Anita Baker, but it's Anita Blake. How you doing, Anita? Do we have to wait until 2020 for him to be impeached? What are you talking about, Anita? 2020, November 2020 is when the election starts. Impeachment process is going to start. Impeachment process is going to start soon. Lorinda, Jolyn. Okay. I'll be doing a broadcast tomorrow also. Everybody, so look out for that. I think I may do another one dealing with the African American origins of Memorial Day, so I'll have more time with that. And I have to do another one also dealing with the last slave ship, the Clotildas, where I have to do a separate one dealing with that. The inquiry answer is in the Mueller report. Waste of time, money, and serious distraction. No, the inquiry process is the beginning. The impeachment inquiry is the beginning of the impeachment process. That's not a waste of time.
10 seconds.
All right, we're coming back.
5, 4, 3.
Welcome back to the African History Network show right here on 9:10 a.m. Superstation of Future Radio. Hey, I'm your host, Brother Michael Imhotep. It is Sunday, May 26, 2019, special Memorial Day edition of the African History Network show. Follow us on our YouTube channel, Michael Imhotep, IMHOTEP, on YouTube, and our Facebook fan page, The African History Network, The African History Network. Subscribe there. Also, turn on the notifications on YouTube and Facebook so you know when we go live and upload new videos, okay? In our first hour, we talked about the African American origins of Memorial Day. I'll be at the Memorial Day Parade out in Inkster, Michigan also as well. I think it's go to cityofinkster.com, cityofinkster.com. They have the information there. That starts at noon. And then also, we started our discussion dealing with it's time to impeach Trump. Okay, here's why. He's getting worse by the day. And we dealt with some of the things that took place this past week. Okay. You can donate to the African History Network, paypal.me/the AHN show, paypal.me/the AHN show. That helps us keep doing the research, stay on the air, finance the show, pay the bills, etc. Okay, you can set up for a recurring donation also, paypal.me/the AHN show, or go to our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. All right, so in Trump's temper tantrum that he threw in the Rose Garden on Wednesday, May 22nd, after he walked out of the 3-minute meeting with Democrats, okay, he told a bunch of lies on Deadline White House on MSNBC. They talked about this, fact-checking a presidential tantrum. Let's go to this clip.
This whole thing was a takedown attempt at the President of the United States. And honestly, you ought to be ashamed of yourselves for the way you reported so dishonestly.
A diatribe on honesty from President Trump that came, of course, as Trump himself was uttering a litany of false and misleading claims. We don't have time to revisit all of the lies and distortions he delivered during his Rose Garden meltdown, but we can run through our own top 5. First, on transparency.
And I think most of you would agree to this. I'm the most transparent president probably in the history of this country.
The truth? Trump himself refused to sit for an interview with Robert Mueller. He's also actively, right now, refusing to cooperate with congressional investigations. And he's the only president in decades not to hand over his tax returns. Not to mention that he's all but eliminated the White House press briefing. Another statement from the president this morning that didn't quite ring true to us has to do with Russia.
I don't speak to Russians about campaigns. When I went to Wisconsin and Michigan and Pennsylvania, I don't say, oh, let's call Russia. Maybe they can. It's a hoax.
The truth? Not only does the Mueller report reveal at least 140 contacts between members of the Trump campaign and Russians, there was also this gem of an overture.
Russia, if you're listening, I hope you're able to find the 30,000 emails that are missing.
And another blatant lie this morning, Trump claiming that he respects the rule of law.
I respect the courts, I respect Congress, I respect right here where we're standing.
Respect, this whole Rose Garden tantrum was an announcement that Trump will no longer be working with congressional Democrats on anything, including their oversight responsibilities. And as for the courts, remember the dozens of attacks on federal judges when their rulings didn't go Trump's way. And finally, what might be the lie to end all lies.
I don't do cover-ups. You people know that probably better than anybody.
You've been indicted, basically, for one. This is the president whose signature is on checks to Michael Cohen, who paid hush money to a porn star. The table's back. Chuck, I need your calming. Your blood boils listening, and each one more audacious than the one before it.
Yeah, he does, as we said earlier, he does do cover-ups, just not particularly well. You know, here's the interesting thing to me, Nicole. The president, remember the Access Hollywood tape? Not that I want to conjure up that, really. But he later said that wasn't his voice.
Yeah.
Or it may not be his voice, or maybe it wasn't his voice. I mean, he can literally take up and say it's down. He can literally take white and say it's black. When he says that the report, that the Mueller report showed no collusion, no wrongdoing, it's all a hoax, it's all a witch hunt, that's only if you don't read it. Because if you read it, it's exactly the opposite.
Right.
And so I don't know that I'm going to say anything right now that's going to make you feel much better. But it's deeply disturbing to see this juxtaposition of falsehood and fact. The president can't keep it straight.
Okay,
it
pause
has
it right
to
there.
just be what?
Okay, we're going to pause that. You can watch that entire clip at msnbc.com. Fact-checking a presidential tantrum. Fact-checking a presidential tantrum. That's from Deadline White House with Nicole Wallace and the gentleman you heard speaking. That's former U.S. Attorney Chuck Rosenberg, okay, who understands corruption. Okay, he prosecuted people for things like this. All right, so this all just happened this past week. All right, this all just happened this past week, and I was reporting on it while it was taking place. So be sure to follow us on our YouTube channel, Michael Imhotep, IMHOTEP, on YouTube, because I was I was covering all this information. All right, and let me see here. All right. Okay, so we'll continue with this as well. 313-778-7600, 313-778-7600 is the call-in number if you have a question or comment. We got a breaking news story from Detroit News. Detroit businessman Dan Gilbert hospitalized with stroke symptoms. Quicken Loans founder, Cleveland Cavaliers owner, quote, recovering comfortably, end quote, company says in statement to the Detroit News. Visit DetroitNews.com for more information. We'll try to update you on that story before we leave the air, before we conclude this show also, okay? Detroit, the businessman, owner of Quicken Loans, owner of the Cleveland Cavaliers, Dan Gilbert, hospitalized with stroke symptoms, okay? And that is a breaking news story from the Detroit News. Okay, let's continue here. So on AM Joy, Joanne Reed, also check out the article from, Washington Post. Washington Post had a good report. They talked about it on MSNBC. And this is entitled, Did Congress Read the Mueller Report? Did Congress read the Mueller Report? More than a quarter of these key lawmakers won't say. More than a quarter of these key lawmakers won't say whether they read the Mueller report or not. Now, Representative Justin Amash of Michigan, and who is the lone Republican who has come out publicly and said that Trump has committed impeachable offenses. He meets the threshold for impeachment. And I followed Justin Amash on Twitter as well because of this. Okay, and I wasn't that familiar with him, even though he's a representative from Michigan. But I follow him on Twitter. Okay, because I don't agree with a lot of his policies, but I agree with him on this. Representative Justin Amash broke ranks with fellow Republicans when he said Special Counsel Robert S. Mueller III's report shows that Donald Trump took actions that, quote, meet the threshold for impeachment, end quote, arguing that the stark partisan divide over the findings was because, quote, few members of Congress have read the report, end quote. This is what Republican Justin Amash said. Few members of Congress have read the report. I agree with him. He's correct. I'm still going through it now. I've got my copy of it in my bag here. I got it from the Washington Post. Now, while it's common for politicians to draw very different conclusions from the same set of facts, the Michigan congressman's suggestion in several tweet storms this past week is bolder, that most lawmakers simply ignored Mueller's report. Okay, while it's common for politicians to draw very different conclusions from the same set of facts, Justin Amash's suggestion in several tweet storms this past week is bolder. His assertion is that most lawmakers simply ignored Mueller's report, and in his tweets, he said that he actually read the Mueller report, and after reading it, he came to these conclusions. Now, the question is, so how many lawmakers actually read the entire 448-page Red Actor report released on April 18th? Now, a Washington Post canvass of House and Senate members on the relevant committees, the House Judiciary Committee, the Judiciary Committee, you have it in the House and the Senate, the Intelligence Committees in both chambers, the House and the Senate, found most are saying they have read the publicly released report in its entirety. But over 3 in 10 declined to respond to 5 yes or no questions after repeated contact attempts, or they offered unclear answers, or they said they had not read the full report. Okay, so over 3 in 10 declined to respond to 5 yes or no questions after repeated contact attempts, or they offered unclear answers, or they said they had not read the full report. 3 out of the 4 Republican chairmen or ranking GOP members on the Judiciary and Intelligence Committee did not respond when asked how they reviewed the report. 3 out of the 4 Republican chairmen or ranking GOP members on the Judiciary and Intelligence Committees in the House and the Senate did not respond when asked, hey, how did you actually review the report? While one senior Democratic senator said he has read the executive summaries, but not the full report with redactions. Now, on this past Tuesday, and this article is from May 24th, 2019, which was, that was Friday, May 24th, 2019. Now, this past Tuesday, the Washington Post emailed questions to all 92 members of these committees in the House and the Senate, okay? And Tuesday was May 21st. Okay, all 92 members of the committees, which had been among the most active in holding hearings and conducting their own investigations into Russia interference in the 2016 election and possible links to the Trump campaign. All right, and they go through and they break down how people responded. You had 25 who did not answer so 25 did not answer our questions. Okay. Those lawmakers include, Senator Kamala Harris, Representative Karen Bass, Representative Veronica Escobar, Representative Lucy McBath, Senator Tom Cotton, Republican from Arkansas. I'm not sure Senator Tom Cotton can actually read. Let's see. So you have a bunch of them. Go read this. Senator Ben Sass, Senator Mike Lee, Republican from Utah, who was blocking funds going to Flint, Michigan, a couple of years ago, back in 2016. So 4 of them were unclear. Okay, those who did not give a clear yes or no answer include Representative Andre Carson, Democrat from Indiana. He's African American, member of the Congressional Black Caucus. Senator John Cornyn, Republican from Texas. Senator Joni Ernst, Republican from Iowa. Senator Chuck Grassley, Republican from Iowa. He's like 85 years old in the Senate. Those who did not read the full report are 3 of them. Those who say they did not read the full report: Senator Christopher A. Coons, Democrat from Delaware; Representative Denny Heck, Democrat from Washington; and the state of Washington; and Representative Krishna Murthy, Democrat from Illinois. Those who read the full report is 60 of them who read the full report. Those who said they read the full entire report is 60 of them. Can't give you all the names. Here are the highlights. Senator Michael F. Bennett, Democrat from Colorado, who's running for president. Let me do a quick scroll here. I have a hunch. Democrat, Independent Senator Angus King, Republican Andy Biggs, Representative, Republican. Okay. All right. So you have Republicans and Democrats who have read the full report. And Lindsey Graham is not one of them. Okay. All right. So you have 60 who've read the full report. Okay. So check this out. We'll post this link here on the thread of the broadcast. This is from the Washington Post. Very interesting analysis. Did Congress read the Mueller report? More than a quarter of these key 93 members of Congress, okay, won't say, whether they've read the full Mueller report. I wonder why, okay? And let's see. And if we have a troll on Facebook, let me know, because I'll get rid of them. I don't play that. All right. So this all just took place this past week, right? So call your member of the House of Representatives. Tell them it's time to start the impeachment process now. Congressional switchboard number 202-224-3121, 202-224-3121. If we just look at some of Trump's, in the past couple of weeks, just some of Trump's possible impeachable offenses, consider some of the events of recent days. So we know Sunday, May 19th, the New York Times revealed that Deutsche Bank's internal investigators raised concerns that the portfolios of Donald Trump and his son-in-law Jared Kushner involve money laundering. Trump is suing Deutsche Bank to block it from complying with congressional investigators. Okay, we know that a federal judge ruled that Deutsche Bank has to comply. The notion that the president is entitled to engage in red flag dealings with money launderers and conceal it from Congress and the public is a wild transgression of transparency norms. Then also, on Sunday, May 19th, the New York Times reported that Trump is preparing pardons for several American war criminals. Trump has long fantasized about war crimes and human rights violations as part of his idealized military. From repeating a fantasized historical account of General Pershing shooting Muslims with bullets dipped in pig's blood, to proposing that the United States seize Iraqi oil as spoils of war. His prospective pardoning of war criminals are steps toward institutionalizing this vision as de facto law. And then we see that the Washington Post reported that Michael Cohen told a closed House of Representatives panel that Trump's lawyer, Jay Sekulow, encouraged him to lie to Congress in 2017. Michael Cohen's lie concerned his handling of a deal to build a Trump-branded tower in Moscow. That's the Moscow project. The subject of the lie is itself a massive scandal. Vladimir Putin, who habitually corrupts foreign politicians with bribes disguised as lucrative deals, was dangling a contract worth several hundred millions of dollars with no financial risk or downside to Trump. Okay, Michael Cohen has testified that Donald Trump encouraged him to lie by repeating in his characteristic mobster code, quote unquote, "there's no Russia," which is a cover story both men knew to be false. Trump, of course, signed the letter of intent for the Moscow project. Now, the new report shows that attorney Jay Sekulow was involved in crafting a false testimony, and that far from president's lawyer freelance ordering perjury, Michael Cohen understood Trump to be working through Jay Sekulow. Okay, the new disclosure fleshes out more evidence that Trump suborned perjury to conceal evidence that he was deeply compromised by Russia during the campaign. All right, and then also, I think it was last week, former White House counsel Don McGahn refused to appear at a House of Representatives hearing to testify to net another serious presidential crime. According to the Mueller report, Donald Trump ordered former White House counsel Don McGahn to tell Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein to fire Special Counsel Robert Mueller and order Don McGahn refused. Don McGahn refused this, but Trump made the order. That's obstruction of justice. Trump later told White House counsel Don McGahn to falsely deny that Trump had ever told him this, which is some more obstruction of justice. Trump has publicly insisted none of this has happened, a denial that makes former White House counsel Don McGahn's testimony highly pertinent, but Trump is blocking Don McGahn from testifying. Okay? Now, Don McGahn can testify on his own, but his attorney stated this past week that he would not testify because Trump does not want him to testify. He's blocking him from testifying. Now, there is no basis for refusing to let Don McGahn testify. It's not executive privilege, a right Don McGahn already waived by discussing it for 30 hours during the Mueller investigation. He discussed it with the Mueller team. Okay? So, this just happened in like the last week or so. More impeachable offenses. All right. Okay, we're running out of time here. Let's go quickly to the phone lines. Let's go to Ray. Hey, Ray, thanks for holding. Welcome to the African History Network show. We got a couple minutes here because I got to get to these other topics. Yeah, tell us where you're calling from.
I mean, I'm not arguing anything. I'm asking questions.
Yeah, which city are you calling from, Ray? Which city are you calling from?
Warren, right?
Warren, Michigan. Okay, go ahead.
Thank you, sir. 2 years and a bunch of money and a bunch of investigators. And the Mueller report, Mueller himself said there was no collusion.
That's not what Mueller said. Did you actually read the report, Ray? Did you actually read the report, yes or no?
All right. So did he say then why did he charge him?
Okay, because if you actually read the report, if you actually listen to the show, I'm explaining it to you. Number one, page 2 of volume 1, Robert Mueller specifically stated they did not investigate collusion because collusion has no legal standing. Collusion is not a legal term. If you actually read the Mueller report, slow down. I'm explaining it to you.
I'm easy. What did he investigate?
I'm explaining it to you. I'm explaining it to you. The Mueller report is broken up into 2 volumes. Volume 1 deals with Russian intervention. Volume 2 deals with obstruction of justice.
He didn't find any Russian intervention, did he?
Yes, he did. Did you actually read it? Ray, did you actually read the Mueller report?
I heard his conclusion.
You heard the conclusion? You heard the conclusion from whom?
Mueller's conclusion was there was no collusion.
That was not his conclusion. Who did you hear that conclusion from? Was it Attorney General William Barr? Who did you hear? Ray. Okay, thanks for calling, Ray. See, number one, when you call into this show, I ain't one of these other talk show hosts. Let me explain something to you. When you call into this show, it would help your argument if you actually know what you're talking about. So when you start off saying that Mueller found no collusion, right there you're telling me you haven't read the Mueller report. Because on page 2 of volume 1, Mueller specifically says they did not investigate collusion. They investigated criminal conspiracy, not collusion. Collusion is not a legal term. It has no legal standing. So go to NBCnews.com, search for Read the Mueller Report. You can read the full 448-page Mueller Report. See, when you call in and start talking about, all this money spent, well, they actually made a profit off the Mueller investigation because they confiscated between $42 million and $46 million from Paul Manafort. The Mueller investigation was about $35 million. Now notice he skipped over all this other evidence that I laid out about 34 people being indicted. Okay, see, notice Ray didn't mention that Trump's former campaign chairman is in prison right now, and Trump's former attorney Michael Cohen is in prison right now. He just skipped over all that stuff. I don't know why. Okay, because if this was President Barack Obama, all these people would be calling in to all these shows all day long talking about all this stuff. So I just find that very interesting. They just skip over all that. Okay, but no, that collusion was not investigated. Okay, so once again, see, this is what happens when you get most of your news from Fox News. Okay, and you don't go research this stuff. And then also, Mueller was following the Office of Legal Counsel memo stating that a sitting president cannot be indicted. That's not based upon the U.S. Constitution. There's nothing in the U.S. Constitution saying that the sitting president cannot be indicted. But that's what Mueller was following. Mueller was leaving it up to Congress based upon the Article 2 powers that Congress has to investigate a president, to impeach a president. Impeachment means filing charges. Does not mean removal from office. Mueller was leaving it up to Congress. But when you call in here and say, Mueller said there's no collusion, well, right there you tell me that you don't know what the hell you're talking about. Okay? Right off the bat, you're telling me you don't know what you're talking about. Read the article from the New York Times. The Mueller report is 448 pages long. You need to know these 7 things. By Matt Apuzzo and Adam Goldman, which breaks down the Mueller report, cites it, and gives you the accurate information, the accurate conclusions. Okay? So check that out. New York Times, nytimes.com. All right. And let me see here. And also, what I find interesting is that people don't say that Mueller could not exonerate Trump of obstruction of justice. Okay, Mueller admitted that. Okay, and Mueller stated in the Mueller report that if he could exonerate Trump of obstruction of justice, he would, and he couldn't do it. So now, when they talked about criminal conspiracy, page 2 of volume 1, that dealt with, Mueller said that to be able to establish criminal conspiracy, they had to be able to establish that there was an agreement, tacit or expressed, between the Russian government and the Trump campaign. The Russian government and the Trump campaign. Not Russians, but the Russian government and the Trump campaign. He said they could not establish an agreement. But Mueller also went on to talk about how the Trump campaign and the Russian government operated in a mutually beneficial manner, and how the Trump campaign openly welcomed the help of Russians. So people need to read, okay? People need to go read this. All right. Let's we'll pick up this topic next week also, because we're running out of time here. Go to msnbc.com and watch the segment from MSNBC AM Joy. Trump impeachment inquiry in House should start ASAP, expert says. Trump impeachment inquiry in the House of Representatives should start ASAP, expert says. We'll get to that next week, and we'll dig in this topic some more next week. Also, read the article from NBCnews.com. Pete Williams wrote a good article, May 22nd, 2019. Trump called it the I word. Trump called it the I word. What is impeachment and how does it work? What is impeachment and how does it work? Okay. And the term impeachment is commonly used to mean removing someone from office, but it actually refers to filing of formal charges. Impeachment does not mean removal from office. It means filing of formal charges. Okay. And the House is the body that does the impeachment. They drop articles of impeachment that are debated in the House Judiciary Committee. They vote to impeach a president. The Senate is the body that actually holds the trial, okay? And it is the Chief Justice who is the presiding judge in the trial in the U.S. Senate, okay? So the Senate then holds a trial or those on those charges to decide whether the officer, a president, or any other federal official should be removed and barred from holding federal office in the future, okay? And we know there have been 2 presidents that have been impeached in the past, neither one removed from office. President Andrew Johnson, who succeeded Abraham Lincoln, and also Bill Clinton. We know Bill Clinton was impeached December 19th, 1998, and they were both acquitted in the Senate, okay? And you've had judges who have been impeached as well. In all of history, only 8 people have been convicted after Senate impeachment trials, and all were federal judges. So read this article from NBCNews.com. NBCNews.com. Trump called it the I word. What is impeachment and how does it work? Okay. Some of these other topics we'll get to next week. I'll do a Facebook Live broadcast probably Monday dealing with the Clotilda. So the remains of the last slave ship, the Clotilda, which came into Alabama in 1860, was found this past week. National Geographic has an article, Last American Slave Ship is Discovered in Alabama. The schooner, which is the Clotilda, the last known slave ship to bring enslaved Africans to America's shores, has been discovered in a remote arm of Alabama's Mobile River, following an intensive year-long search by marine archaeologists. Quote, descendants of the Clotilda survivors have dreamed of this discovery for generations, said Lisa Demetropoulos Jones, who's the executive director of the Alabama Historical Commission, the AHC, Alabama Historical Commission, and the State Historic Preservation Officer. Quote, we're thrilled to announce that their dream has finally come true. We're thrilled to announce that their dream has finally come true. Now, the captives who arrived aboard the Clotilda were the last of an estimated 389,000 Africans delivered into bondage in mainland America from the early 1600s to 1860. Thousands of vessels were involved in the transatlantic slave trade, but very few slave wrecks have ever been found. Quote, the discovery of the Clotilda sheds new light on a lost chapter of American history, says Friedrich Hiebert, Hiebert, archaeologist in residence at the National Geographic Society, which supported the search. Quote, this finding is also a critical piece of the story of Africatown, which was built by the resilient descendants of America's last slave ship, end quote. That's in Alabama, also Africatown. So the descendants of those Africans who came from Dahomey in West Africa on the Clotilda, their descendants, many of them still live in that town called Africatown. Okay, so rare first-hand accounts left by the slaveholders as well as their victims offer a one-of-a-kind window into the transatlantic slave trade, says Sylvian Diouf, a noted historian of the African diaspora. And you've heard me talk about Sylvian Diouf here on the show before. I got to reach out to her again and bring her on the show. She's the author of a book called Fighting the Slave Trade, which documents the various ways that Africans, specifically in West Africa, fought against the transatlantic slave trade. She said, quote, it's the best documented story of a slave voyage in the Western Hemisphere. Sylvian Diouf, whose 2007 book Dreams of Africa in Alabama chronicles the saga of the Clotilda. She said these captives were sketched, interviewed, and filmed. Okay, she says, referring to some who lived into the 20th century. Quote, the person who organized the trip talked about it. The captain of the ship wrote about it. So we have the story from several perspectives. I haven't seen anything of that sort anywhere else. We know, I did a broadcast a few weeks ago about Radoshi. Radoshi was the African-American woman who's the longest living survivor, the oldest living survivor. She passed away in 1937. Cudjoe Lewis, who Zora Neale Hurston interviewed in her book Barracoon, which came out last year. We thought he was the longest survivor. He passed away in 1935. All right, so check this out. NationalGeographic.com, the last American slave ship is discovered in Alabama. We'll talk about this some more next week. Hey, remember at the African History Network, we focus on educating, empowering, and inspiring people of African descent throughout the diaspora and around the world, because right now it's corrects wrong behaviors. Not over till we win. Wakanda forever. We'll talk to you next week. Peace.
The day you lose your strength is the
All right,
day
guys.
you lose your energy.
I got to get out of here. Talk to y'all later. Visit, you donate to the African History Network, paypal.me/the AHN show, paypal.me/the AHN show. All right? I got to get out of here. Talk to y'all later. Peace.